Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Apparently, people don't have confidence that I'm going to be able to understand this video. Those people will remain nameless because they don't deserve my attention. All right, let's do it. Feature history, 30 Years War. Apparently, this is convoluted. It's nothing I can't handle, obviously. Original video, the top description, everything. Just everything. All the things. Join the Discord.
The Great Wars of Europe. We all know them. World War II, World War One, the Napoleonic Wars, the 30 Years War. Wait, feature history guy, he said because you don't know my name. What's a 30 Years War?
You're going to tell me.
Good question. Let's find out today in feature history. Hello, and welcome to Feature History, featuring the 30 Years War. Named so because the 29 years, 11 months, 3 weeks, and 1 day's war was just really not as catchy. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the rationale of the war and the effect it had throughout history all the way up to the modern day. So if that sounds like a slice of fried gold, well then let's go.
Oh yeah.
Now, I'm going to do something real crazy, real revolutionary, and we're going to talk about the background. The 30 Years War started in 1618 and ended in, say it with me, 1648. Very good. It was a war about the Protestant Reformation. Now, understanding the Protestant Reformation is pivotal to understanding the 30 Years War. But this video isn't called the 30 Years War and the Protestant Reformation, so what are we going to do? Well, luckily for you, I featured in a video over at Jabsy's channel doing a 3-minute history video on the Protestant Reformation and the German Peasants' War. So go click on that if you didn't come from there and check it out.
So, alright.
Love it, I'm sure of it. So,
I think this is it.
During the 16th century, the Reformation had been dividing the Holy Roman Empire, and although Lutherans had been officially recognized in 1555, the many Calvinist rulers and their citizens were not. So the resulting tensions caused Protestants and Catholic states to form alliances. Plus, foreign powers had a vested interest in these developments. The French were encircled by Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs and sought to weaken them. The Spanish hoped to retake their Dutch provinces and maintain military access along the Spanish Road, and the Protestant Scandinavian countries looked to expand their influence in northern Germany.
So everyone wants some territory.
But the immediate cause of the war can be found in Bohemia. Holy Roman Emperor Matthias died and had no heirs, so along with the Bohemian Diet elected the Catholic Ferdinand to take the throne of Hungary and Bohemia. Fearing they would lose their religious rights and preferring Frederick V of the Palatinate, Bohemian Protestants threw the representatives of Ferdinand out of the palace windows, which started the Bohemian Revolt in 1618.
How high are the windows?
The rebellion was initially quite successful and soon which started the Bohemian Revolt in 1618. The rebellion was initially quite successful and soon spread to Transylvania, but besides from limited support from the Ottoman Empire, who declared war on the Habsburg ally Poland, the rebels' only real ally was Frederick of the Palatinate. So as the rebels had little international support, Ferdinand, now the Holy Roman Emperor, was able to reclaim Bohemia after crushing the rebels at the Battle of White Mountain in 1620. The Palatinate was now left by itself, so Spanish troops invading from the lowlands easily overwhelmed them in 1622, forcing Frederick to flee while his lands were confiscated. Side note, all the turmoil as well as famine and crop failures during the war saw a resurgence of witch hunts.
Imagine how awful that's gonna. Is there a worse way to go? I guess there's like that. What's that one with like the bamboo that they like put you over bamboo and like bamboo grows so fast it like grows through you? That sounds horrifying. Also the rat one where they like put the metal bucket. Burning has got to be pretty bad though.
But back to the war. Christian IV of Denmark was worried that his role as the champion of Protestantism was all the turmoil as well as famine and crop failures during the war saw a resurgence of witch hunts. But back to the war. Christian IV of Denmark was worried that his role as the champion of Protestantism was challenged when Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden declared war on the Polish. So in 1625 Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden declared war on the Polish. So in 1625 he reignited the war to turn back the Catholic gains. However, the Habsburg forces under the generals Tilly and Wallenstein quickly routed the Danes and drove them back into Jutland. Plus, domestic problems in France and England prevented them from sending help to the Danes.
Jutland?
So the forces under the generals Tilly and Wallenstein quickly routed the Danes and drove them back into Jutland. Plus, domestic problems in France and England prevented them from sending help to the Danes. So the Danes had to admit defeat in 1629, but the Protestants got a new champion a year later, King Gustav Adolphus of Sweden. In fact, he had been involved in the war for a couple of years.
I've read like a whole essay on this in the Discord. I still have to read more.
So the Danes had to admit defeat in 1629, but the Protestants got a new champion a year later, King Gustav Adolphus of Sweden. In fact, he had been involved in the war for a couple of years after he sent troops to help the besieged Protestants in Stralsund, a town in northern Germany. The Swedes started the campaign successfully as they won many of the initial encounters. However, during the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, King Adolphus was killed in battle. The Holy Roman Empire would also suffer the loss of their two great commanders, Tilly and Adolphus was...
It's really good. It's a better horse than I could draw. Sorry.
In Stralsund, a town in northern Germany.
I was distracted by the horse.
The Swedes started the campaign to help the besieged Protestants in Stralsund, a town in northern Germany. The Swedes started the campaign successfully as they won many of the initial encounters. However, during the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, King Adolphus was killed in battle. The Holy Roman Empire would also suffer the loss of their two great commanders, Tilly and Wallenstein, during this phase of the fighting. Nevertheless, the war continued for another 3 years, and as was common throughout the war, the German states were devastated. It's estimated that by the end of the war, over a third of the German population was killed, thanks in part to the brutality of the mercenary armies. Therefore, war exhaustion was high within the Holy Roman.
And wasn't like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, the plague, where you lost like a third?
Empire. So in 1630, mercenary armies. Therefore, war exhaustion was high within the Holy Roman Empire. So in 1635, the Protestant and Catholic member states agreed to make peace and end the internal fighting. But the French feared the authority given to the Habsburgs over the Empire member states. Notably, member states could now no longer make foreign alliances, and an imperial...
Look at those calves. I'm distracted
peace
again.
And end the internal fighting. But the French feared the authority given to the Habsburgs over the Empire member states.
He looks
Notably,
like
member
Hook,
states could now
Captain
no
Hook.
longer make foreign alliances, and an imperial army was to be created. So Catholic France formed an alliance with Protestant Sweden and joined in this now political war. The Swedes occupied northern Germany and moved as far south as Prague, and the French took Alsace and Flanders. Meanwhile, the French also helped to start separatist rebellions in Spanish Catalonia in 1640. Elsewhere, the Habsburgs managed to gain the support of their old rival Denmark, who looked to contain their neighbour Sweden. And the French and the Swedes continued to be backed by Protestant states like the Dutch provinces and Brandenburg Prussia. But this was largely inconsequential. Both sides tried to make peace for a few years, and it wasn't until the death of Cardinal continued to be backed by Protestant states like the Dutch provinces and Brandenburg Prussia. But this was largely inconsequential. Both sides tried to make peace for a few years, and it wasn't until the death of Cardinal Richelieu, the chief minister of France, in 1648 that it was able to be achieved. However, both Sweden, Denmark, and France and Spain would continue fighting for a few more years. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the last great religious war in Europe and is one of the most important treaties of history. It established the end that Spain would continue fighting for a few more years. The Peace of Westphalia in Denmark and France and Spain would continue fighting for a few more years. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the last great religious war in Europe and is one of the most important treaties of history. It established the idea of territorial integrity and, along with...
What about the treaty after America?
The move from
Second
history.
most important.
It established the idea of territorial integrity and, along with the move from mercenary to professional armies, this helped form the modern-day nation-states.
Sorry, I'm laughing at my own jokes.
Treaties of history. It established the idea of territorial integrity
I'm
and
sorry.
The Peace of Westphalia in 16... It established the idea of territorial integrity and, along with the move from mercenary to professional armies, this helped form the modern-day nation-states. It also greatly upset the balance of power within Europe. Nations like Sweden and Brandenburg Prussia, who split Pomerania between them, became emergent great powers. Plus, Bourbon France expanded its borders east and became the dominant land force in Europe. The Swiss had their independence guaranteed, and the Spanish would have to recognize Dutch independence. On the other hand, the declining Spanish would go on to lose more land to the French and face rebellions in Portugal. Plus, the Holy Roman Empire finally had to recognize Calvinism and grant the states more freedom. This ultimately weakened the empire and would later encourage the Ottomans to attack Vienna.
Got it. I'll link that video too. That was a great video. Alright, we did that.
I'm going to quickly recap what was said in that video, which links to our topic. We have the Catholics and the Protestants at each other's throats. Tensions high, and there's been quite a few wars. In 1555, an attempt was made to settle everything. and there's been quite a few wars. In 1555, an attempt was made to settle everything. The Peace of Augsburg was made and introduced the idea of cuius regno, eius religio, which is Latin for basically whoever reigns, the official religion is his. Noted, if your religion was not either Catholic or Lutheran, well then you're shit out of luck. If we move over to the Holy Roman Empire, you'll see that it's not perfectly united. That really sums up all of the HRE's history, but here I'm referring specifically to the distribution of Catholics and Protestants. So what happens when you have a ruler who's Catholic ruling over a Protestant majority? Well, the quick answer is a lot of angry Protestants. To address this, Emperor Rudolf II granted Protestants toleration through a letter of majesty in 1609. Rudolf's house, the House of Habsburg, all decided that he's not exactly what they're looking for in the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and so he's replaced by his brother Matthias. By the time Rudolf's house, the House of Habsburg, all decided that he's not exactly what they're looking for in the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and so he's replaced by his brother Matthias. By the time Matthias had fully taken over, he realized as an aging, childless monarch he was not doing anyone any favors, and so ended up handing over rulership to his cousin.
How do all these monarchies have no kid?
Ferdinand II. Ferdinand II took power in 1617 as the Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Bohemia. He was a devout Catholic, and so after ascending to rulership, he decided to revoke the letter of majesty. We now go to Bohemia. II took power in 1617 as the Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Bohemia. He was a devout Catholic, and so after ascending to rulership, he decided to revoke the letter of majesty. We now go to Bohemia, which is the modern-day Czechoslovakia, which I suppose is the modern-day Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Protestants there were furious, and so on the 23rd of May, 1618, they retaliated and threw the councillors Ferdinand had administering the region in his absence out the window.
Right, okay.
This was known as the defenestration, which is a fancy word for throwing someone out the window, of Prague. Actually, it was the second defenestration of Prague.
I want to know how tall the building
is. In 1419, they'd done that before. Shockingly enough, after falling 21 meters, these councillors survived. Cat had done that before. Shockingly enough, after falling 21 meters, these councillors survived.
Like 63 feet tall? That's pretty high.
Catholics claimed that angels had
they survived?
After falling 21 meters, these councillors survived. Catholics claimed that angels had swept down and saved these righteous men.
Yes.
Protestants said they fell in a pile of shit. With this retaliation, the Bohemian Revolt had started, and so of course the 30 Years' War did as well. Now, what's critical to understand about the 30 Years' War is it is separated into 4 phases. The Bohemian phase, the Danish phase, the Swedish phase, and the French phase. In the first 2 phases of the war, it was predominantly a local and religious struggle, whereas in the second 2, it became a truly continental and political war. So now with Bohemians in open revolt, the rebellious fervour began to spread across Germany. So Ferdinand reached out to his nephew, Philip IV of Spain, for assistance. He agreed, as this conflict would help offer the Spanish an opportunity to reconquer the Dutch. The Bohemians needed a major power to back them, and so started sending out deals to everyone they could think of. These letters were seized by the Austrians, though, who made it public that Bohemians were whoring out the same deals to multiple people, so most people backed away from the Bohemians. Frederick V was elected as the King of Bohemia in 1619, and so whether or not he wanted to be in this situation, he was now. On the 8th of November 1620, Frederick and Ferdinand's armies confronted each other in the Battle of White Mountain, where Ferdinand decisively defeated the Bohemians. So the Bohemian phase really closes there, and it seems as this would have just been a short local dispute if it wasn't for the fact that it raised up many pressing concerns for all European monarchs, and several Protestant leaders kept close tabs on these happenings, so it wasn't too long before someone decided to intervene. Denmark was directly north of the HRE and even had several holdings in the HRE, so you could see why the Protestant King of Denmark, Christian IV, had a vested interest in this conflict. Denmark, England and Scotland joined to protect the still standing Dutch, who I've completely neglected up to this point, but basically they're there, they're Protestant, they're near the HRE, you get the story. It might also be worth mentioning that they would be obviously facing the HRE, which consisted of Austria and Bohemia because Bohemia had been taken back, Spain, Hungary and Croatia. I can't constantly be updating you on who joins and leaves the war, otherwise facing the HRE, which consisted of Austria and Bohemia because Bohemia had been taken back, Spain, Hungary and Croatia. I can't constantly be updating you on who joins and leaves the war, otherwise I'd spend 73% of the video doing it, so I made a chart, and by that I mean I stole a chart I found on Wikipedia and printed it up, and you can find that in the description. Moving on, in 1625, Denmark's armies headed south with their heads held high and then headed north with everyone who still had heads. They'd been firmly repelled by the Catholic mercenary Albrecht von Wallenstein. To summarize the Danish phase, it's basically just another Protestant defeat.
Got it.
Now, as I said earlier, up to this point, all the fighting had been contained to the HRE and had been fought purely on a religious basis. But in 1630 begins the Swedish phase. Interestingly enough, the beginning of the Swedish invasion coincides with Ferdinand losing his trust in Wallenstein and dismissing him. One character I want you to particularly turn your attention to is King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. He's a Lutheran, a commander, and an all-around badass. He descends into the HRE to the Protestants' aid and achieved victory at the Battle of Breitenfeld in credit to his use of mobile artillery, which saw him be referred to as the father of modern warfare. Now, if you look at the chart, you'll note France is listed as against the HRE during this period. To explain that, France was helping to fund Sweden's war effort during this phase. So while Gustavus was leading the charge, back in France, Louis XIII was getting together the money to make this possible. You might be asking yourself, why is France, a Catholic country, helping the Protestant Swedes? Well, actually, this is where what I was getting at earlier comes into play. The religious basis of this war became less and less prevalent, and politics really became the deciding factor in most choices. So what pushed France to join Sweden? Well, it's all about the balance of power. You'll notice this concept a lot if you study French-German relations for any extended period of time. France, knowing it was surrounded by the Habsburg, saw backing Sweden as a way to bring the Habsburg down a notch and secure a more balanced and equal playing field in Europe. So with all that explained, we're ready to delve into the French-backed Sweden taking over HRE, and oh shit, Gustavus just died.
Gustav!
Like any backed Sweden taking over HRE, and oh shit, Gustavus just died.
I don't know as much as I would like about you, but you seem like a cool dude.
Like any true commander, Gustavus Adolphus died in battle while leading a cavalry charge on the 6th of November 1632. With Gustavus's death, Sweden decided it would like to take more of a backseat role in the war, so in 1635 Sweden tags in France. Sweden will be handling the budget and France will take care of the more hands-on business. So now we have two major powers going full force with no stupid Baltic Sea in between them. As you can imagine, this was the longest, the bloodiest, and the truly defining part of this war. Given that, I'd prefer to really summarize this part. There was a resurgence in witch hunts, mass hangings, and other tragedies of war. Some areas lost over 66% of their population. More people died in the 30 Years' War than the American Civil War and Napoleonic Wars combined. Another way to contextualize this would be that World War I killed 1.7% of the population, whereas the 30 Years' War, without machine guns, planes, tanks, and high-powered artillery, killed 1.4%. That's only a 0.2% of a
terrifying
difference. So after all this, after 30 years of fighting, like most wars, the result is inconclusive. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia is signed. It weakens the Holy Roman Emperor, stripping their control over the princes and really completely destroying the idea of the Holy Roman Empire as any kind of actual empire. The Dutch also get their independence from the Spanish, but they of course don't get all their de jure lands back. Brandenburg gains territory, leading to the rise of Brandenburg/Prussia. If you want to know why Prussia is important, I'd recommend part 2 of my 19th century France video. You might want to watch part 1 as well. Actually, just watch all my videos. Territory goes to France, really starting to solidify the French-German rivalry that lasted all the way up to World War II. Ooh. And Switzerland gains its independence from the HRE as a confederation. If you desperately want a winner, Switzerland gains its independence from the HRE as a confederation that lasted all the way up to World War II. And Switzerland gains its independence from the HRE as a confederation. If you desperately want a winner, I think you'd be relatively safe in claiming a French victory. But if you have any particularly snobbish friends, they might flip out at you. Well, other than, of course, redraw.
So pretty much the Discord. I'm just going to go on Discord and say France won.
The borders, what else did the 30 Years' War accomplish? Freedom of religion began to seep more into society, with Calvinism being accepted and people being granted the freedom of private worship. Religion began to withdraw from the main...
No! You worship in public, damn it!
...stage of European people being granted the freedom of private worship. Religion began to withdraw from the main stage of European diplomacy, and instead politics began to be a much larger player. I might not agree with this filthy Frenchman, but hey, at least I get what I want, so I'll work with him. That kind of thing. The 30 Years' War was very much the climatic end of an era. It was
like
not
a fun
only
time.
The final war of the Protestant Reformation, but also the final religious war in Europe. Not only the final war of the Protestant Reformation, but also the final religious war in Europe. Hopefully.
I don't get it.
Europe.
Tel Aviv stands with Paris. I'm not touching that. I ain't touching any of that. Don't ask me.
Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you, sir. Great video. And I pretty much aced that, so nice try. It wasn't even that confusing of a video, to be honest. I'm not going to summarize it just now, but yeah, that was a good video. And I'll be back soon with another one. See you guys soon. Say hi, Blucher.